Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and patch 11.2 brings with it a ton of new surprises, from massive class revamps all across the board to a bunch of new adjustments when it comes to endgame content, from dungeons, delves, and raids, but also a brand new system of tier sets. Previously, all tier sets worked around certain specific playstyles or certain talents, but this set of tier sets is actually a lot more unique for 11.2, as Season 3 allows players to pick their tier set of choice, giving them two options, one for every hero spec that is available for your class spec specifically, which means players are given so many more choices as to how they're going to be playing their favorite class in the next season. And out of all the classes out there, I think Rogues has definitely gotten some of the most impactful tier set options by far. Even though our hero specs for the most part are passive, these tier sets do help unlock that hidden potential of every single one of the hero talents, from Deathstalker, Fatebound, as well as Trickster, making them stronger, better, and even more powerful than ever before, with some massive gameplay changes all across the board. So I wanted to really take a closer look at the Rogue tier sets, and you guys can let me know in the comments which class do you think I should look at next for next tier set overview. As always, if you guys want to see more videos like these for 11.2 updates, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. But otherwise, let's dive right in. So we finally get to talk about Rogues in 11.2. However, this may be like my only real Rogue video for this patch, because it doesn't seem like Rogues are getting too many new class changes, at least for the time being. Maybe Blizzard will surprise me over the next few weeks with a massive rework. They did say they want to streamline Outlaw in particular, and I was hoping same would be done for Subtlety and Assassination, but so far things have been very quiet. Maybe they're planning to do something cool for 11.2.5, maybe something cool in Midnight, but I can't lie though, I am a little disappointed seeing a lack of changes when it comes to Rogues. As for the actual set though, I don't think it's a bad one. I don't think it's a peak Rogue set either way. It has this iconic hoodie with a mask, a couple of metal bits, shuriken aesthetic for the shoulders, as well as the gloves and the belt. I love the smoke bombs on the chest piece. I do like the poison rolling off of the shoulders for the mythic set, and the smoky effect around the helm. I think that's really cool, and some of the recolors are also quite unique. The only thing that holds it back for me is the fact that we've had hoodie with a mask and a couple of random armor bits and metal bits before in previous expansions, and I feel like it's a thing that's done over and over and over. I love the piratey skull whole aesthetic we had last season, or at least current season for Season 2 and War Within, but this is not terrible. Some of the recolors are also really good. And I can also imagine with the shoulders how there's going to be different colored smoke that rolls off of it, the deep blue, the dark red, and even the PvP variations of it. Although, looking at the PvP Elite set, I feel like that one looks more like a monk rather than a rogue, and I feel like maybe us and monks could have swapped sets for this season, and you probably couldn't tell the difference between a rogue and a monk, honestly. But the actual bonuses themselves I think are a little bit more exciting than the actual look of the set, even though it doesn't look that terrible, especially for the spec of Assassination. I'm going to start off, since these are hero spec sets more than spec sets, I'm going to go over Deathstalker first, how it shares with Assassin and Subtlety, as it doesn't have too much variation with the specs, but I think it actually is some really good and unique gameplay that is on the offer here. Now, before we actually go into the actual Deathstalker playstyle, I think I should explain what Deathstalker does. While Rogue's hero specs or hero talents for the most part are very passive, they have quite a little bit of depth to them, and there's a bit of a gameplay element to it, especially for someone who maybe just recently got into Rogue. It's still a lot to go over. I feel like Rogue, out of all the other classes out there, has a bit of this complexity for the sake of complexity moments. So I kind of wanted to go over really quickly just what the main mechanic is of Deathstalker and then how the tier set impacts it. Deathstalker has a number of plague damage components, from auto attacks dealing additional plague damage to Fan of Knives being able to deal plague damage and get more combo points. You have some execute mechanic with Fatal Intent that stacks up and procs when an enemy is low on health, buff to your Rupture bleeds to more plague damage, but a huge portion of those traits focus on adding additional passive plague damage as part of your kit. For the most part, a huge portion of Deathstalker will revolve around Deathstalker's mark ability. Basically, in the opener, when you ambush a target or hit him with a Shadow Strike, depending on your spec, you put up a mark on the target. So now, anytime you spend combo points into a finisher, at least 5 combo points, you will now be able to consume that mark. That will deal immediate plague damage to the target, buffing one of your basic combat abilities after it is used up. And after you consume all of the stacks, you now get the capstone buff called Darkest Night. Darkest Night, after you consume the final stack of Deathstalker Mark, you next Eviscerate or Envenom with max combo points, deal 60% more damage, guaranteed crit, and reapply stacks of Deathstalker's Mark, which is basically how you'll be able to, in most cases, reapply those stacks without having to vanish to ambush the target or shadow strike. So it has like its own kind of closed-in loop. And the whole mechanic comes down to you want to try to consume the Deathstalker's Mark procs as quickly as possible to then restack up and get the combo accessory for your Darkest Night to then hit the target with a massive Envenom that is a guaranteed crit, and then you're back to trying to consume the stacks of Deathstalker's Mark as quickly as possible. It is actually a very fast-paced spec. You're just trying to consume those stacks as quickly as you can, just so you can get more value out of your Darkest Night big capstone proc. Now, the actual tier set is interesting because what it does is it amplifies that entire kit. Shiv for Assassination kind of gives you like a damage window. With talents, it can either increase the nature damage that target takes for a few seconds, but it can also be expanded to increase bleed damage as well, which basically encompasses your entire kit. So now Shiv for Assassination will increase the effectiveness not only of your nature damage, bleed damage, but also your entire kit of Deathstalker damage amps by 50% while it is active. And this goes through everything, all the passive elements, but also things like your capstone. So if, let's say, I am trying to consume the Deathstalker's Mark as quickly as possible, when I actually have Darkest Night proccing, it's no longer 60% damage amp, now it is 90% more damage with a guaranteed crit. So you're hitting even harder than ever before while that Shiv window is active. So it makes it very strong. Shiv amplifies that entire kit, giving you much more damage than ever. The 4-set reads, Shiv now has a 2-second increased duration, so the damage amp from Shiv, but also from the 2-set, is now lasts a little longer, equals more damage. And now it consumes an application of your Deathstalker's Mark when you Shiv the target, which means with this set, you can now churn through more stacks of Deathstalker's Mark to achieve the capstone. So more capstones throughout an encounter, harder hitting capstones as well as the rest of the kit than ever before. It is a very simple tier set, but it's a very powerful one, and it's huge for any of you that are looking to play a rogue and are looking for big bursty damage. So if you're looking to hit the hardest hitting Envenoms or Eviscerate the Subtlety, this might be the best choice for you and has a lot of potential. With a spec like Subtlety, it works off of Symbols of Death instead of Shivs, but it also increases the effectiveness of all Deathstalker abilities, though buffed by 30% instead of 50%. Symbols of Death also gains a longer duration and also consumes Deathstalker's Mark. What's interesting for Subtlety is with the talent of Death Perception, you can actually have multiple charges of Symbols of Death. So it means during your opener, you will churn through those charges as quickly as possible, as long as you're not clipping their full duration, just in your opener. Which means that you'll be able to consume those stacks quicker, get more value of capstones during your biggest burst window, while all the cooldowns and all the buffs are active, which gives Subtlety some insanely good AoE damage. And if you were to adjust your talents to go for a bit more Eviscerate damage, this could be very, very strong. In past, Subtlety has always had a hard time really making Deathstalker playstyle work. However, I think with this tier set, the amount of potential burst damage, which is what Subtlety is all about, could be massive and may potentially make the spec playstyle option a much more appealing one in the future with the rest of your talented kit. From there, I want to jump back to the spec of Assassination, and instead of going over Deathstalker, I want to go over Fatebound, a new, and for Assassination at least kind of new, but also potentially an up-and-coming viable choice going forward. Fatebound hasn't really found a way to really work for Assassination in the past, but they're giving them a very powerful tier set this time around, which is absolutely massive. The 2-set reads, Kingsbane deals 10% more damage, has a 4-second increased duration. Obviously, that is really, really good, but it also now plays into the Fatebound playstyle, which I guess now we should go over that very, very quickly. So Fatebound rogues basically play around this coin toss mechanic, which actually has a cool visual component to it. So anytime you spend comm points, at least 5 of them, into a finisher, you now flip a coin, and you actually get to see a visible coin when you do so. So if, let's say, I go for a Rupture, you'll see that now I spawn a coin, a heads, or a tails. Heads coin buff gives me 10% more damage, which continues to stack, though for heads it continues to stack by 2 additional percent. The tails, what it does is it deals immediate cosmic damage to the target. It's just literally the Lady Luck itself strikes at the target immediately. So when you get a tails, you deal cosmic damage, and every time you get tails over and over and over, you continue to increase that tails damage by 10%. So it goes from 10% more damage to 20% to 30%, and on and on and on it goes. The whole point though is to consume and flip coins as often as possible. The more coins you flip, generally the more damage you're going to do. The more coins you flip and the more times they land on heads over and over or tails over and over, the stronger the buff is, and that's basically the prime mechanic of Fatebound Rogue. Normally it is filled with RNG. Every time you spend comp points into a finisher, you flip a coin and you never really know what you're gonna get. However, Assassination will now be able to harness that RNG to get some guaranteed procs. Thanks to the tier set, Edge Case, which is the talent of this playstyle, now flips an additional Fatebound coin, and activating Kingsbane also triggers its effect. Edge Case is a passive where whenever you use Deathmark, you flip a Fatebound coin and guarantees that it'll land on an edge, counting as both a stack of heads and tails. But because of your tier set, you will now be able to flip it twice, so you basically get 2 stacks of Fatebound coin tails and 2 stacks of heads. And when you use Kingsbane, you also get to do the same thing. So you can get both of them through 4 stacks and then 4 stacks. And then you can actually continue that chain further in order to keep increasing those stacks with guaranteed consistency. With talents such as Inevitable End, Cold Blood not only benefits 2 abilities, but both of them have to be Envenoms. But it allows those Envenoms that are buffed by Cold Blood to guarantee that whatever coin flip you just had, it'll be guaranteed match the next time around. So for the next 2 coins, like if you get yourself a double tails and double heads, and then you go Cold Blood and Venom, it'll guarantee force you to get yet another stack of tails and heads twice for 2 Envenoms, which is kind of massive. Basically gives you an opportunity to stack both of those buffs to 6 stacks in an opener, which is crazy. However, it could only get better because the 4 set now reads, having a lucky Fatebound coin reduces the cooldown of Deathmark by 30 seconds and Kingsbane by 15 seconds. The lucky coin mechanic is every time you flip a coin, when you flip it 7 times heads or 7 times tails, you get a buff of Fateful Ending, which grants you 7% more agility, and if you do it at the start of a fight, that agility buff lasts for the rest of the encounter. It's just a permanent buff that you achieve. If you continue to get those coin flips again and again, it just deals some more cosmic damage, but you basically want to get Fateful Ending in the opener as early as possible because given a class 7% more agility just because is a huge damage buff all across the board. And now, once you get this buff, you get a huge cooldown reduction for your major combat abilities, which means that your cooldown of Deathmark becomes a 1.5 minute cooldown instead of 2 minutes. This means you can use Deathmark more often inside of an encounter. Same thing goes for your Kingsbane. Instead of being a minute, it now becomes a 45-second cooldown ability, which means you can now use more Kingsbanes inside of an encounter. So you take like a 6-minute fight. Normally you can get 3 Deathmarks inside of a 6-minute encounter, but when it goes down to a 1.5 minute CD, now you can get 4 Deathmarks. And Assassination does majority of its damage during its major cooldown, so now you're just doing more damage in the same time span window. There's also a huge discussion regarding how it moves and shifts your cooldowns from a 2-minute class to a 1.5 minute class. Certain raid fights and dungeon fights are actually better structured for 1.5 minute classes, which could give Assassination a lot more flexibility with its cooldowns, thus increasing its overall damage depending on the encounter. So it's going to be more of an encounter specific adjustment, but a massive boon which allows you to shift your cooldowns without losing any power on any of the major CDs. But the tier set in its edge case mechanic does also allow Assassination to guarantee that in the opener, you're always going to get that powerful capstone of Fatebound, which is usually very RNG. Sometimes you get it early, sometimes you get it later, which makes the playstyle a little bit less consistent. But now you can guarantee 6 stacks of tails and heads in the opener, and that means whatever finisher you use next is going to get either tails or heads to a 7 stack, which gives you that lucky coin buff, giving you better cooldown reduction on your major abilities, allowing you to use them more regularly, but also giving you that passive damage amp, which makes it super strong, making Fatebound potentially a viable option going forward if it's tuned correctly. The other rogue spec that shares Assassination's Fatebound playstyle is Outlaw Rogue, though the cooldown reduction mechanics for this one are not going to be nearly as impactful, but this setup is probably going to be deceptively very good. The trick set buffs the damage of your Ghost Strike, but also increases the duration. Ghost Strike is a comp point builder that does decent bit of damage on its own, off GCD, so it's pretty easy to use, and also puts a debuff on the target, causing them to take additional damage, so that's going to result in a nice damage amp. Being able to give Ghost Strike also a way for you to proc Edge Case means that you're going to be able to get more tails or heads, which is a huge portion of Outlaw damage. This comes from the tails damage of Fatebound. While Outlaw Rogue does not have or play into Inevitable End to guarantee the capstone, you churn through so many finishers in the opener that there's a pretty good chance that with Destiny defined, you're probably going to land on tails enough times or heads enough times that you'll likely will be able to proc that capstone very early into the encounter. So for Outlaw Rogue, you never really had an issue proccing it because you just churn through just that many finishers. Fateful Ending cooldown reduction for Adrenaline Rush and Ghost Strike could also be nice, not necessarily. I guess for uptime of Adrenaline Rush, it can be okay. More uses of Ghost Strike and more uptime of that debuff can also be good, but it'll primarily benefit from being able to use its abilities more often through encounter to get more coin flips for tails, which is where a huge portion of your damage comes from. It is alright, and after testing it, it doesn't really feel all that interactive of a tier set. It does mean that I have a really easy time maintaining Adrenaline Rush basically throughout majority of the encounter, like a 97% uptime or something insane like that, but a huge portion of the damage will come from the more tails that you get from the coin flip, at least in raid fights. So it is one of those tier sets that's not really interactive, but it's like passively very good, maybe like insanely good numerically. So don't be surprised if you end up potentially playing Outlaw Rogue as this coin flip spec that doesn't really feel all that different rotationally, but just feels a little stronger, a little better, and definitely gets a lot more tails damage throughout an encounter. However, those of you that are Outlaw Rogue fans may enjoy Trickster a lot more, especially since you get to play Killing Spree, the gunslinger variation of it, which looks absolutely amazing. Look at that. Oh, it looks gorgeous. Bunch of pistol shots all around. It looks glorious, and it does a lot of damage too. It does have a longer cooldown, but it really doesn't feel like it. 3 minutes sounds like a lot, but it really is not a lot at all. Now, Trickster Outlaw, I think you guys are going to really enjoy this tier set, because with the 2 set, you basically get to use Unseen Blade more regularly and it hits harder. The way that Unseen Blade plays is normally basic abilities like Backstab, Shadow Strike, Ambush, Sinister Strike, depending on your spec of Subtlety or Outlaw, strike the target with an Unseen Blade. Targets are phased in with a debuff for 10 seconds. Phased, it means that enemies just take 5% more damage from your abilities and they cannot parry your attacks. This effect may occur once every 20 seconds, so every 20 seconds you get to strike the target with this blade. However, you can also reset that cooldown with auto attacks, but also every time you press one of your major abilities, Killing Spree for Outlaw, Secret Technique for Subtlety, you get to ignore its cooldown, and then your next 2 abilities will proc Unseen Blade. And after you proc 4 Unseen Blades, your next Eviscerate or Dispatch is transformed into a Coup de Grace, which is just a harder hitting finisher that consumes more comp points, causing it to hit harder. But for Outlaw Rogue, there's also a cooldown reduction mechanic to it, so it basically feeds into itself. For Outlaw Rogue, the cooldown reduction mechanic is Restless Blades. Consuming comp points into a finisher reduces the cooldown of many of your skills from Adrenaline Rush, Between the Eyes, Blade Flurry, but also mobility skills like Grapple and Hook, Roll the Bones, Sprint, Vanish, and Killing Spree. So for Outlaw Rogue, it's more about getting more coup de grace in order to get better cooldown reduction, although it does have some damage amp components with Flawless Form and things like that. So it is very, very strong in general, but it kind of like is self-contained and it's pretty passive. Now the 2 set increases the damage of Unseen Blade, which is significant, but also gives it a 30% chance to immediately refresh its cooldown, so sometimes it'll just like be able to hit twice in a row, and that means more capstone uses for your rogue. This is really strong for Subtlety and Outlaw for multiple reasons. However, the 4 set is where things get very, very interesting, because Coup de Grace may now be activated a second time within a 5-second window, dealing 100% of normal damage. What's funny about this tier set is actually Coup de Grace was bugged for a short bit of time, where Outlaw Rogues could press it twice in a row just very, very quickly if you had high enough haste and low enough GCD. So you basically got to use it twice, one with full comp points and the other with like 1 or 2 comp points, but because it just adds 5 on top of it, it was efficient for damage, but also pretty efficient for cooldown reduction. That bug eventually got fixed, but it looks like they turned that bug into a feature, because now it's our 4-set bonus, except now it's an intended mechanic of the ability, but it's just hilarious how they were able to bring back what was a bug, but now make it a literal feature. So now if you have comp points, you can press Coup de Grace, and then if you build enough comp points afterwards, you can press Coup de Grace again. So that stacks up, gives you better cooldown reduction. It also gives you Flawless Form, because Coup de Grace, against the primary target, allows you to get 5 stacks of Flawless Form, so you're able to buff the damage of your finishers for at least 12 seconds. It's very strong altogether. It is very, very powerful. For Outlaw Rogue, this is huge because it's better cooldown reduction, more overall damage, Flawless Form is going to amp up the damage of your finishers. It's going to give you faster cooldown reduction for Killing Spree. All of your abilities are going to come back quicker. The ability of Unseen Blade and Coup de Grace also hit significantly hard, so it's going to be very, very strong as well altogether. It's just a very good combo that makes the fast-paced playstyle of Outlaw even quicker than ever and super fun to play into. I found this is better, a little bit better as an ambush build, but maybe there'll be an opportunity for a keep it rolling like Mythic Plus build in order to take leverage of Trickster. I think what also helps Outlaw Trickster work a little better is the changes to Killing Spree. Since you now no longer lose control of your character, you can now use it a little bit more safer. Trickster allows you to use that Killing Spree a lot more regularly, but the overall kit and the cooldown reduction feels very smooth for the spec. Your cooldowns back up so quickly that it feels like there's almost no downtime. There's always something to do as Outlaw, and I've been loving this playstyle specifically. Trickster Outlaw feels amazing so far in 11.2 PTR. As for subtlety, the Trickster tier set is about the same. You still get a better version of Unseen Blade that can reset, and you can use Coup de Grace twice in a row. It is alright for subtlety, but it's really just a damage amp more than anything. There is an opportunity for Flawless Form to stack up even more, which can buff up the damage of your finishers. Also, abilities like your Shadow Dance technically does have some cooldown reduction to it. Symbol's Secret Technique also has cooldown reductions based on comp point spend. Coup de Grace does consume more comp points beyond your max, like 5 extra on top of however much you consume, so technically there is better cooldown reduction for that ability as well, so you're going to see more uses of Secret Technique. However, from there, that's about all I can really say. The tier sets are going to result in a damage increase, but they don't necessarily transform your playstyle that much. In fact, if you're someone who enjoys the familiarity of subtlety, like from Season 1 and Season 2, the Season 3 version of tier sets, I mean, the spec doesn't really change too greatly in terms of its overall playstyle and its core. But if we are just honest with ourselves, I do think subtlety tier sets just lack flavor. They're kind of bland compared to the flavor you can get with like huge cooldown reduction as Assassination, or big Deathstalker damage, or Outlaw Rogue that feels really good and passively better as a Fatebound, or massive cooldown reduction as Trickster. I just wish Subtlety got something like that. It'd probably be fine numerically, but it just doesn't really feel like the spec has gotten improved outside of just raw damage numbers specifically. But with that being said, as always, I do want to thank all of you guys so much for watching and hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you did enjoy this update or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Also, join this community if you want to let me know which class do you think I should go over when it comes to the next tier set for 11.2 PTR. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Which of the rogue tier sets do you like the most? And as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.